It's a Tuesday night dinner. Someone's voice is rising over an election they have zero control over. The food is getting cold, and one woman at the table quietly refills her glass, leans back, and says absolutely nothing. She isn't confused. She isn't checked out. She's a Gen X woman who watched closely enough, long enough, to know exactly how this ends. Most people look at her silence and see apathy. They're wrong. What they're actually looking at is the end result of paying very close attention for 4 decades straight. If you were born between 1965 and 1980, you didn't get a political education. You got a political atmosphere, and those two things are completely different. An education gives you context. An atmosphere just seeps into your skin. She came home to an empty house most afternoons. The TV stayed on. The news played in the background. But there was no adult sitting next to her explaining what any of it meant. So she processed it raw. No filter, no mentor, no bigger picture. What the screen showed her wasn't inspiring. Watergate had already poisoned the emotional temperature of every household before she was old enough to understand it. Her parents didn't need to explain it. It came through in the eye roll when a politician appeared on screen, the heavy sigh that meant they weren't surprised by the latest scandal. She absorbed that skepticism before she had a word for it. Then January 28, 1986 happened. The Challenger exploded 73 seconds after launch, live, in front of her entire class. Teachers gathered children to watch history. What they witnessed instead was a lesson nobody planned. The people in charge don't always know what they're doing, and they cannot always protect you. Iran-Contra followed. Oliver North sat in his uniform before Congress and basically told the world he'd do it all again. Almost nobody faced real consequences. The lesson landed hard. The system doesn't hold everyone to the same standard, and some people are protected by the very institutions built to check them. Then Clinton arrived in 1992 with an energy that felt genuinely different. He actually saw her generation, and for a moment, that connection felt real. Then came the scandal, the years-long media circus, and the very specific image burned into her memory, a woman being publicly destroyed while a powerful man survived intact. For many Gen X women, that was the moment a door quietly closed inside them. Not loudly, not dramatically, just shut. Here's the layer most people miss entirely. From childhood, she was trained to manage the emotional temperature of every room she entered, not through one big lesson, through 1,000 small corrections. Don't upset him. Be the bigger person. Think about how this makes others feel. Politics activated all of that conditioning at once. She wasn't just expected to care about issues, she was expected to care visibly, consistently, in ways that made everyone around her comfortable. Post about it, show up for it, then manage the reactions of everyone who agreed too loudly or pushed back too hard. She became the emotional regulator for conversations she never agreed to moderate. Sociologist Arlie Hochschild called this emotional labor, the invisible work of managing feelings as part of a social role. For Gen X women, this tax applied everywhere: marriage, friendship, career, and eventually politics itself. Every news cycle was another demand. Every crisis required public grief. Every election cycle needed her outrage, her hope, her energy. And she was already running on whatever was left after everyone else took their share first. So she made a quiet decision. And that decision didn't go in the system's favor. There's one thing about this generation that almost nobody talks about. Gen X women were the first children raised as professional consumers. Saturday morning television was a calculated, research-backed targeting operation. By age 8, she had already been the intended audience for hundreds of campaigns designed by adults using child psychology against her. She learned early how to recognize the shape of a sales pitch, the excitement that's slightly too loud, the promises that are just a little too clean, that specific feeling of being moved towards something before you've had a second to think. When political campaigns started using that exact same playbook, the focus-grouped slogans, the manufactured urgency, the carefully staged moments of authentic emotion, she felt a very specific recognition in her gut. It didn't feel like leadership. It felt like a commercial she'd already seen 100 times before. Psychologists call the result learned cynicism. Not learned helplessness, where you simply feel your actions don't matter. Cynicism goes a step further. The belief that the entire system was deliberately built to manufacture that feeling of powerlessness inside you. And once you see the machinery clearly, the only move that makes sense is to stop feeding it. Here's the part that deserves to be said out loud. The things she worries about most, retirement security, healthcare costs, whether Social Security will still exist in 20 years, all have a political address. They run through legislatures and budget meetings held by people she will never meet in person. Her silence doesn't protect her from those outcomes. She is living inside them right now, every single day. That isn't a character flaw, but it is worth sitting with honestly, because there is a real difference between a boundary built on self-awareness and a habit that formed so long ago she forgot she chose it. She didn't start out this way. She started by paying very close attention. And then she watched that attention fail to move anything until the act of watching started to feel like the problem itself. Her silence was never weakness. It never was. But the most powerful question she can ask herself right now isn't whether the system deserves her energy. It's whether the distance is still a choice, or just whether she stopped questioning a long time ago.